the film, I Am Not Your Negro, James Baldwin says this: "This is not a racial problem. It is a problem of whether or not you are willing to look at your life and be responsible for it, and then begin to change it." I want to take up Baldwin's challenge today and frankly every day and use it to construct our freedom series. Last week I talked about freedom, these 3 weeks. Construct it as freedom with. To whom are we accountable and with whom are we interdependent? Last week in Freedom From, we talked about the internal work that we need to do to move past that which holds us back. The benefits of addressing addiction or greed or hatred or despair. You named them, and we talked about those things. Redoing our own repair from trauma back when, or addressing our own mental and physical health challenges. It is not, please be clear here, it is not that we are aiming to perfect ourselves, if we even knew what that would be. It's rather that we are mindful that in order to live out our values in the world, we do well to get out of our own way. Today, I want to talk about freedom with, about accountability and interdependence. And once we create some space for liberation, who do we do that with? And this is a little bit of a calendar jump for the following reason. Next Saturday, this next Saturday, June 14th, is the local Ames Juneteenth celebration. Now, the date of Juneteenth, as we heard earlier, is a portmanteau that tells us what the date is, June 19th, and we learned something about how Juneteenth came to be. Growing up in Texas, I thought it was just a Texas holiday. It was only later that I've learned that it's a national holiday, and it became more known in the last decade or so. But because we will have a booth at Bandshell Park next Saturday from noon to 5 p.m., thank you, Mary Richards, for being the point person for our booth. And because we are advertising our film series collaboration, I wanted to talk about it today and also acknowledge Pride Month so that we can see intersectionality and opportunities for interdependence across multiple constituencies and from various angles. Let me talk first about this big word, intersectionality. Some of you have heard this. Activist Kimberly Crenshaw says that intersectionality draws attention to invisibilities that exist in feminism and anti-racism and class politics. So obviously it takes a lot of work to consistently challenge ourselves to be attentive to aspects of power that we don't automatically experience. The idea is that none of us, as Audre Lorde said, none of us is one single thing, right? And for someone like me who lives with a number of intersecting privileges, heterosexual, cisgender, white, middle class, it behooves me to think about the intersectionalities of oppressions that others might experience. My intersections of privileges stack up on top of each other. And intersections of oppressions have a similar weighted quality. Does that make sense? I think it's useful for me to be reminded. It's a social theory, intersectionality, cumulative effects of oppressions. So let's just keep that in mind over here. So if we're going to work on being accountable, to whom are we accountable? I think it's interesting for us to think as Unitarian Universalists. In Some other churches this morning, if you ask the question, to whom are you accountable? The answer might be to God, to higher power, to Jesus, to a deity. Most of us in here, though some might, but most of us, I think, would answer that question differently. I answer it that we are accountable to each other to live our values out in the world. But our each other cannot only be those of us in this room and online at this moment, right? How wide does our accountability stretch? I would also argue that we are accountable to our ethics and values. I am accountable to living those values out in the world. Now, you could do a little theological gymnastics and say, that's accountability to higher power. That's okay. But it's useful to think about, to whom are we accountable? And in that accountability, we are answerable to people to whom we're in community with. We are answerable to those we are in community with, even some we might rather not be answerable to. And to recognize our interdependence means, I think, as Dr. King said, no one is free until we all are free. And that is so resonant to me today in this moment of attacks on civil liberties. If there's not due process for everyone, there's not due process for anyone. No one is free if we are not all free. So that's how I get to this moment and thinking about accountability and how can we be accountable and have freedom with other people to do the things that we want to do. So I want to talk a little bit about our dismantling racism team and what I think about dismantling white supremacy culture as an activity. James Baldwin, gay, black, intellectual, really reminds us that we have to take a look at our lives and be responsible for it and then begin to change it. He also famously said, not everything that is faced can be changed, but until it is faced, nothing can be changed. So our dismantling racism team has been meeting for a number of years. They read together, they discuss ideas. Many of you read their articles in the newsletter almost every week. They'll take a book or a film or something that they've thought about and write up a little article. We invite you to join us anytime you think you might be able to do that. And then the idea came up about how can we do more than just talk inside about it? How can we build relationships? And we worked for a while on how can we build relationships. Can we serve a meal together? Can we trade pulpits? What could we do about that? This is the result. This is a step toward the result of what we're doing. You received today this little zine. Do you all know zines? I love zines. Little magazine, right? It's so cute because it's one piece of paper that's folded up in a cute way, right? This summer, with a partnership between UUF Ames, the NAACP of Ames, Friendship Baptist Church, and the Ames Public Library, we will present a series of 8 films about the African American experience in the U.S., about resilience, about creative ways of problem solving, about relationships, about collaboration. This team it was a subset of our dismantling racism team. Joan, were you kind of the point person on it? Joan White worked on it, Mary Louise Burt, Estella Lauder, several folks worked on it. Please forgive me if I'm leaving you out. But they didn't figure it out on their own. They didn't say, hey, we think we ought to have a series of black films, and here's what we think we ought to show. And by the way, NAACP, would you like to sponsor it with us? that wouldn't be good relationship building or accountable. For months, they worked together, slow, steady spade work, as Ella Baker talked about, and built relationships, had gathered names of films, winnowed them down, talked about with each other why they thought they were important, listened to each other, learned how to say what felt uncomfortable in the moment, and trusted the relationships that they built to be able to say what they needed to. I'm telling you that to do anti-racism work, you have to wake up in the morning and believe that you will make a mistake. Because if you're worried that you won't make a mistake, you'll never get out of the driveway. You are gonna get a ding on that new car, right? You have to be willing to make mistakes in order to go forward. And so, we're gonna do these 8 films at the public library this summer from June 24th to August 12th. After each film, there will be a discussion, and for most of the discussions, they'll be led by African American people in the community. If you are unable to attend, oh, by the way, there's a little QR code on the back that takes you to the library page where you can read more about the films. If you are unable to attend, or this is not your jam, would you please hand this to someone else who may want to attend? We had a group of folding folks, of zine folding folks this week. Oh, we were pretty funny trying to figure out how to put this from one sheet. Wait a minute, I can do it. One sheet into this cute little thing. Old dogs learn new tricks, right? So we're going to have these at our table at Juneteenth. We're going to give some to Friendship Baptist Church and to the NAACP and to the library. Look for them around town. We hope that we'll be able to share these quite a bit. This is interdependence and accountability with. This is how we build relationships. And then the next thing is, how do we continue to cultivate those relationships? We talk about dismantling racism, but for my own work, I think one of the most important things that we can do is dismantle whiteness. My own internalized white supremacy culture. One of the freest things that I learned one of the pathways to freedom for me was learning to say without shame, I am a racist. I'm not saying that I'm a bigot. I hope I'm not a bigot. But I benefit in this racist society and structure. As a white woman, I benefit. How can I not be a racist? It doesn't diminish me to say it. It gives me a place to aim. It gives me a place to start or to continue with accountability. And if I'm lucky, if we are lucky and we do it right, we get to work on dismantling whiteness for the rest of our lives and experience that incremental relationship-building freedom. If we are lucky and we do it right, we get to work on dismantling heteronormativity for the rest of our lives and work on and experience that moment by moment, slow spade work of freedom. I tell you, liberation lies this way. To the extent that I say, no, I'm not a racist, I can't be a racist, that can't be me, I'm not that, I'm not like, oh, name the racists that come to mind when you think of that. I'm not like Bull Connor, or I'm not like Strom Thurmond, or I'm not like any number of them. You're saying them, come on, come on. The more that I push that back and say, that's not me, I can say bigotry exists. That is true, that bigotry exists. But the more that I can embrace racism is actually present because white supremacy culture is present. That's the piece that I can work on for myself. Whiteness is conjoined with patriarchy and colonialism and capitalism, and it unleashes this ethic of mastery and self-sufficiency and control. Now listen to me. When I talk about patriarchy, I'm not talking about individual men in the room. I may be talking about some individual men, but they're not in the room. I'm talking about a system. I'm talking about a system that lifts up one set of values at the expense of others. To talk about whiteness is not to condemn people with skin like mine. It is to recognize that whiteness exists as a system of thought that benefits at the expense of others. Heteronormativity, I'm not bad because I'm heterosexual, but I participate in a system that lifts up one set of values at the expense of other people. It's complicated and messy and but it's so freeing to get into it. And I believe that the more we do our own work, the more available we are to be accountable partners, to be true allies rather than performative allies. So yes, leaning into the conversation about equity and justice are so important. You all know about the Iowa DEI law. It's related, the legislation that went with it restricts DEI initiatives in public institutions of higher education and state agencies. It prohibits any state agency or school from having programs or positions that address issues like social justice, intersectionality, and systemic oppression. Baby, let's be happy we have the separation of church and state. We are going to keep talking about it here and keep lifting up that this is our value. We are not going to shy away from this. We are not going to shy away from this. To talk about these are the values that we hold dear. I don't care if they fall out of fashion. Brian Stevenson, the great civil liberties attorney and activist, was interviewed on NPR just a couple of weeks ago, and it was in reference to the 5th anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. And he talked about the slavery abolition movement, and that when it would gain traction and more people would talk about it, there would then be some kind of legislation that would make it illegal to talk about it, right? So this is nothing new under the sun. And you ask me, how do I keep from leaning into despair? How do we keep from leaning into despair? This is one way, is recognizing that these cycles continue, these cycles of building up support for something, and then the forces of oppression come back, but we come again, and it comes back. There's cycles that go. So the story is still being written. That's a piece of not leaning into despair. This ain't over. This ain't over in Iowa. I tell you, Iowans. I get to be an Iowan now. Baldwin said, to look around the United States is enough to make prophets and angels weep. This is not the land of the free. It is only sporadically the home of the brave. It is up to us to be brave. It is up to us to be brave, to do our own work, to recognize the ways that our lives are intertwined with love and hope and beauty and honesty and oppression and dark corners that we would rather not look into. I'll tell you a story about my wedding ring. This is my grandmother's ring. My granddaddy bought it for her in 1956. It was his best year for a cotton crop. My granddad was a cotton farmer in Northeast Texas. She wore it very proudly. She loved it. It's got 4 little stones in it. And I wear it now as my wedding ring. And I love, love, love my family. I have a good, strong memory about it. But it was when I read Isabel Wilkerson's work, Caste, that I began to understand more about how my upbringing was complicit in the cotton economy, that the middle class values that I was able to grow up with were built on the cotton economy. My granddad was happy to pay his black workers and his white workers the same. That was something that he was proud of. Nevertheless, he was the landowner. And so this ring that I wear on my hand is an everyday reminder of the complicity and the love that is bound up in my family. We each have places where our complicity and love is bound together. And rather than allowing it to be oppressive, we can open that up and talk about it honestly and allow the freedom with our interdependence, our intersectionality, and allow ourselves to be accountable to our stories of the past, the present, and the future. May it be so. May we always live in our values. May it be so. And blessed be.